내가 숨겨둔 그 아이 그으로 데려와야겠네. 다 잃은 자가가 저한테 뭘 줄 수 있는데요.
Heejoo finally understands that divorce is the only way to protect the man she loves, Leon. So she forces herself to say words, sharp as a blade, words she never wanted to speak. They had only just confirmed their feelings for each other, with a sweet newlywed life seemingly right around the corner. What a cruel twist of fate. The publicly exposed marriage contract shakes not only Leon's position, but also the company Heejoo has protected with her life. Whatever happened to the Heejoo who once boldly challenged her father Sung Hyun-guk, claiming the company's rising stock price was thanks to her own abilities? Today, she's on her knees before him, begging him to save Leon. Sung Hyun-guk had already planted informants inside the palace, and his daughter-in-law, Han Da-young, had been quietly passing along palace intelligence. Even without his daughter humbling herself before him, Sung Hyun-guk had every intention of standing by Heejoo's side, because he already had the royal consort, Dowager and Prince In-pyong's royal fund embezzlement, and numerous other crimes firmly in his grasp. He had never forgotten the incident where Heejoo nearly died in an accident, a poisoning attempt originally meant for Leon. So even as the entire nation and Castle Group reeled from the marriage fraud scandal, Sung Hyun-guk's only real dilemma was deciding which card to play first. Then his daughter, a woman who had survived years on sheer pride alone, got on her knees for the very first time, tears in her eyes, begging him to save Leon. Watching her, Sung Hyun-guk vows to tear Prince In-pyong limb from limb for bringing this chaos upon them. Meanwhile, the Queen Dowager finally summons the child she has kept hidden all these years to the palace. Prime Minister Min-hoo, even after receiving the marriage contract, ultimately chose not to leak it to the press, has turned his back on her. And even her own father, Prince In-pyong, suspects her of being behind the late King Seonjong's death. The Queen Dowager is slowly crumbling. The only thing she has left now is her own daughter, the princess, a direct bloodline of the royal family. Just as the situation seems to be turning against Leon and Heejoo, someone steps forward to change everything. That someone is the Toseongji, the royal secretary. The Toseongji was responsible for overseeing all communications, relaying the king's commands to his ministers, and delivering petitions and reports from ministers back to the king. Through this role, he held enormous authority, effectively a monopoly over all communication between the throne and the court. In truth, it is the Toseongji who should have been by the young king's side all along. When Prince In-pyong was threatening and intimidating the young king, it arguably should have been the Doseongji who stepped in to stop it. If Episode 9 left your heart aching with Heejoo's tearful declaration of divorce, then Episode 10 will be the episode of overwhelming counterattack, the payoff for all that pain. Why did the writers choose to bring in the Toseongji, the voice and ears of the Choson court, at the moment of greatest crisis? And how will the existence of the princess the Queen Dowager has kept hidden all this time shake up the entire board? Let's dig deep into every foreshadowing clue in the preview. Prime Minister Min has been endlessly torn between desire and reason. It felt like his carefully suppressed patience could explode at the slightest provocation. But in the end, he found himself looking into Heejoo's clear eyes and seeing the depth of her love for Leon, a love he could no longer deny. Even after obtaining a confession that Autumn had nearly assassinated the Heejoo's life, he didn't immediately inform Leon. It wasn't exactly that he withheld it out of selfish desire for Heejoo, who was now another man's wife. It was more that Leon already knew Prince In-pyong was behind the poisoning attempt. There was nothing new to tell. Leon had long been sharpening his blade, waiting for the right moment to strike down the royal family's maternal relatives. That's why Prime Minister Min didn't seek out Leon. Instead, he wanted to extract a confession from the Queen Dowager to make everything airtight. But in the process, he received something completely unexpected from her: the marriage contract. What troubled Prime Minister Min more than the contract itself was the realization that the Queen Dowager now knew about Leon and Heejoo's arrangement. The thought of a cornered Queen Dowager weaponizing that contract, and all the attacks and accusations Heejoo would then have to face, it left him deeply unsettled. The Queen Dowager could not afford a single moment of peace. She knew the late king's royal decree was out there, and that evidence of Prince Inpyeong's assassination attempt on Leon had been exposed. She had handed over the marriage contract, but Prime Minister Min's silence was unbearable, so she leaked it to the press herself. Then she summoned Heejoo, driving straight for the most vulnerable parts of her, exactly where it would hurt most. The Queen Dowager had an almost instinctive ability to dig into a person's weakest point. But this is Heejoo we're talking about. Did she really think that would work? Rather than letting the Queen Dowager's hunger for what she couldn't have, and her bone-deep sense of superiority get to her, Heejoo refused to be manipulated. Instead, she calmly stated the one answer the Queen Dowager least wanted to hear, that Leon had been the one to pursue her first. Leon, the man who had been Yoon Yi-dong's first love, yet had never so much as glanced her way, had chased after Song Heejoo, had told her he loved her, had all but begged her to live with him for 3 years. The Queen Dowager kept a smile on her face, but she couldn't hide the sound of her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Heejoo, who had long sensed the Queen Dowager's complicated feelings toward Leon, didn't look away. She held the Queen Dowager's gaze steadily, like a warning. If I can't have him, I'll destroy him. The Queen Dowager hadn't intended to kill Leon, but now she felt she had no other option. The one man she had ever felt something real for. She had thought his marriage to Song Heejoo was just a transaction, and now they were telling her it was real. She couldn't bear it. Meanwhile, Leon, having grabbed Prince Inpyeong by the collar, fury barely contained, senses that the time has finally come to draw his sword. The moment to hold this father-daughter pair accountable for pressuring a young child king, for forcing him to witness things no child should, had arrived. Now, here's something I'd like you to think about. Has the Queen Dowager ever shown any maternal warmth toward the young king? The truth is, the one she had always loved was the fiery, unyielding Leon, not the gentle, fragile Sunjong. During her late teens, when she attended Sungkyun Kwan and moved in and out of the royal court, she had even let herself imagine, what if Leon had been my husband? He captivated her that completely, carrying the child of a man she constantly compared unfavorably to Lee. The Queen Dowager found herself grimacing every time she saw traces of Sunjong in the young king. Not once did she offer even a single warm smile to her own 8-year-old son. Not even a flicker of motherly love. Even though it was her son Yoon Yi who gave her the power she wielded. This is partly why many viewers suspected that Yoon Yi might not actually be Sunjong's son at all. That he might be another woman's child, adopted into the royal line. And those suspicions exist precisely because of how the Queen Dowager has treated him. There was a warm woman who had truly understood Sunjong's heart. She gave him comfort he could find nowhere else. And so when Leon found himself fearing that he might lose Heejoo, he quietly wondered, was this how my brother felt? Sunjong never wanted to be king. He had only wanted to live a quiet life with the woman he loved, but his position never allowed him that. Even as he was pressured by Prince Inpyeong into marrying Yoon Yi-dang, another woman held his heart. Both Yoon Yi-dong and the woman Sunjong loved became pregnant around the same time. But fate gave Yoon Yi-dong, who desperately wanted a son, a daughter. And the woman Sunjong truly loved was carrying a boy. It was from this moment that Sunjong and Yoon Yi-dong's marriage truly fell apart. And the once warm relationship between Leon and his sister-in-law fractured at the same time. Fighting with Sunjong day after day, the Queen Dowager was shaken to her core when she learned that his other woman was pregnant with a son. She made a declaration to Sunjong she would switch the children. If the woman didn't hand over the boy, she and the child would be banished from the kingdom. Sunjong was more afraid of Inpyeong than he was of the Queen Dowager. The memory of his own mother and father killed by the prince's hand flashed through his mind, and he yielded. Even the gentle woman who loved him came to believe that surrendering her son to the palace was the only way to keep him safe. And so, she agreed. But the Queen Dowager could never bring herself to love the young king she had taken in. The royal-blooded princess, the true heir, was hidden away, growing up in a barren countryside far from prying eyes. Meanwhile, the son of a commoner woman was being raised with the utmost reverence as the king's direct descendant. The Queen Dowager swallowed her bloody tears. If only it had been the upright, bamboo-strong Leon, not this fragile child. She could only press her hand to her hollow chest, and all of her resentment found its target in the young king. No matter how bitter their marital fights were, the young king was never in her thoughts. He had been thoroughly, completely shut out. Leanne could not hide his disappointment in his sister-in-law. The young Mies growing up in the countryside, already announced to the public as a son, flickered at the edge of his mind. But Yoon-yi was also his precious nephew. He could not abandon either child. The late King Heejoo, ever anxious that stepping out of Prince In-pyong's favor might cost him his life, had also failed to look after his son. Their conflicts reduced the young king to tears. But fortunately, Yoon-yi received from his uncle Leon the love his own parents never gave him. Leon tells Yoon-yi, "Whenever you're scared, whenever you're afraid, come to me. Run to me." And here's the great irony, everyone. It was Sunjong, not Leon, who received the full love of their father, the late King Huijong. Leanne, as the second son, was actively pushed aside, dismissed, diminished. No matter how hard he tried, he received no love, no encouragement, only warnings. Know your place. Become your brother's shadow. Never outshine him. Yet Leon, who had never received a single drop of fatherly love, was the one who cherished and protected the young king. This reveals so much about who Leanne is as a person, the depth of his heart, the breadth of his character, the makings of a true king who could embrace everything and everyone. Meanwhile, the Queen Dowager spirals out of control. Prime Minister Min had found it painful to watch, but also, oddly, a relief when Heejoo, who had so long insisted her feelings weren't real, finally admitted her love for Leanne. He had grown quietly frustrated watching her deny it. The more she rejected the idea, the more he had wanted to believe her. Because somewhere in his mind, he had been painting a picture Heejoo standing beside him one day. But Heejoo loves Leanne. And for him, she lays down every last shred of her pride. She kneels before the brother she once despised. She bows before the father she had resented. She begs. The cold, absent father she had longed for as a child, when she finally sought him out, he had met her with a frigid stare and told her not to covet what wasn't hers. No matter how hard she studied, no matter how she graduated at the top of her class with those small, determined hands, what she received from him was never warmth, only a gaze sharp enough to cut. She had never once bowed her head to that father. But thinking of Leon, her knees simply gave way. She could rebuild herself as a businesswoman. Her reputation, the people's respect, those could be recovered. But Leanne's situation was serious. The rumors that he was coveting even his young nephew's throne were gravely damaging. Sung Hyung-guk moves first to calm public opinion. He has Taeju publicly declare that the marriage contract was fabricated. And then he joins forces with the Doseongji. The Doseongji's entrance is the turning point of the entire drama. He proves everything the existence of the child the Queen Dowager has kept hidden. Prince In-pyong's crimes, and the fact that the leaked contract was a forgery all along. The Doseongji had served as the closest confidant to both King Huijong and King Sunjong. On the very night Sunjong died, he witnessed Prince In-pyong's crimes firsthand. The Queen Dowager had burned the royal decree in a fit of rage, but it wasn't enough to cause a large fire. The real arsonist was someone in Prince In-pyong's service. Sunjong had long wished to abdicate in favor of Leon, and Prince In-pyong knew it. Seizing his opportunity, he had the king assassinated. By a bitter coincidence, that night happened to be the same night. The Queen Dowager and Sunjong had their terrible fight. A fight that Leon had heard every word of from just outside. The Doseongji and Leon had agreed to conceal everything until the right moment came. Leon's power was still limited, and the Doseongji himself was not yet in a position to challenge Prince In-pyong directly. But when Leon announced his marriage to the second daughter of Castle Group, the #1 conglomerate in the country, the Doseongji knew. The moment had finally come to reveal the truth. And as for the marriage contract the Queen Dowager had leaked, it was a fake, pieced together from torn scraps she had fished out of a trash bin. The original contracts were secured in Leanne's vault and in Heejoo's private residence. What the press received was never the real thing. In a gathering attended by the royal court and the full cabinet, the Toseomji lays out every charge the attempted poisoning of Lee. On. The crime of locking away the Queen Dowager's own royal-blooded daughter in a remote village while elevating an illegitimate child to the throne, and more. The deaths of Queen Consort Woo-hyun and King Hwee-jong, the suspicious accidents, the poisons used, all of it is finally brought to light. Leanne, having laid bare everything before the assembly, fixes his gaze on Prince In-pyeong as the man tries to flee. Sang Hyun-guk, too, understood that the best way to protect Heejoo was for Leon's position to be unassailable, so he handed every last card in his hand directly to Leon. Prince In-pyeong and the Queen Dowager are utterly, completely destroyed. The Queen Dowager screams, raging at Leon until the very end. "You're really going to take the throne that poor young child is giving up?" she cries. Leanne's answer is unflinching. That throne was never meant for a child who wasn't even the rightful heir. And he holds accountable those who placed the wrong person on the throne of kings. So what did you think of today's review? A lot of you said episode 9 left you frustrated. I think of it as essential build-up for the satisfying payoff we're about to get. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
이 이상은 손해보기 싫어요.